Mark McNeese's Fearsome Fiction podcast is brought to you by YourRightPath.com. That's your WRITE Path.com, where every life is a story and each of us is the storyteller, and by Mademark Media, an independent media studio. Mademarkmedia.com.
You're listening to Mark McNeese's Fearsome Fiction podcast. Mysteries, thrillers, and rare finds. Fasten your headphones.
Welcome to True Crime Tuesdays on Fearsome Fiction. Today we're going to talk about the Giggling Granny, a woman who baked prune cake, read romance magazines, giggled at her own arrest, and murdered at least 11 people, most of them her own family. Her name was Nannie Doss. The press called her the Giggling Granny, the Lonely Hearts Killer, the Black Widow, and Lady Bluebeard. She was a small, cheerful, grandmotherly woman from Alabama who seemed like the last person in the world you'd suspect of anything, which, of course, is exactly why she got away with it for so long. Her weapon of choice was arsenic. Rat poison, mostly, the kind you could pick up at any hardware store in the American South in the 1920s through the 1950s. She put it in whiskey, in coffee, in stewed prunes, in prune cake. She put it in the food of husbands, grandchildren, her own mother, her sister, her mother-in-law. She did it over and over again for nearly 30 years, and nobody suspected a thing. Until the very last one, because Nannie Doss was always smiling, and you don't suspect the woman who's smiling. This is her story, narration provided by Wondervox. Part 1. Nannie Doss was born Nancy Hazel on November 4th, 1905 in Blue Mountain, Alabama, a small farming community in the northeastern corner of the state. She was one of 5 children born to James and Louisa Hazel, and from the beginning, life was hard. Her father, James, was a controlling, domineering man who pulled his children out of school to work the family farm. He forbade his daughters from socializing, from wearing makeup, from doing most of the things that young women of the era considered ordinary pleasures. Nannie and her mother despised him. That particular resentment would simmer in Nannie for the rest of her life. When Nannie was 7 years old, she was riding a train with her family when it stopped suddenly. She was thrown forward and struck her head hard on the metal bar in front of her seat. For years afterward, she suffered from severe headaches, blackouts, and bouts of depression. Nannie herself later claimed that this accident was the root of everything, that something had been knocked loose in her that day that never found its way back into place. Whether that's true or whether it was simply a convenient explanation is something no one can say for certain. What we do know is that the young Nannie found her escape in her mother's romance magazines, True Romance, True Love, the pulp publications that promised a world of passion and devotion and happily ever after. She read them obsessively. She dreamed about them. She built an idea of love in her mind that was based entirely on fiction, and when the real thing failed to measure up, as it inevitably did, the consequences were deadly. She was 16 years old when she married for the first time. Part 2. A series of unfortunate husbands. His name was Charlie Braggs, a co-worker at the linen factory where Nannie had found work. Her father approved of the match, which should perhaps have been the first warning sign. They married in 1921 after a courtship of only a few months. And almost immediately, things went wrong. Charlie's mother moved in and proceeded to make Nannie's life miserable. The marriage was miserable. By the late 1920s, both of them were miserable and unfaithful. And then 2 of their 4 daughters died of what was recorded as food poisoning. Charlie Braggs left. He took their eldest daughter and fled, later saying that he had been frightened of Nannie. He never elaborated on what specifically frightened him. He just knew that he needed to get out. Nannie's second husband was Robert Franklin Harrelson, whom she married in 1929. He was an alcoholic with a criminal record for assault, and the marriage lasted 16 miserable years. In 1945, Harrelson raped Nannie. The next day, she put rat poison in his corn whiskey. He died that evening. No one suspected a thing. Nannie's daughter Melvina had by this time given Nannie a grandson, a little boy named Robert Lee. He died mysteriously in July of 1945 while in Nannie's care, the cause listed as asphyxia from unknown causes. 2 months later, Nannie collected $500 in life insurance she had taken out on the child. Melvina, exhausted and grieving, thought she had seen something during the birth of a second baby, thought she had seen her mother holding a pin near the infant's head. The baby died. Doctors could find no definitive cause. Nannie was already moving on. Husband number 3 was Arlie Lanning, found through a Lonely Hearts column, the personal advertisement sections of the romance magazines Nannie had loved since childhood. Arlie was an alcoholic and a serial cheater. He died of what appeared to be heart failure. Shortly afterward, the house they had shared burned down, and Nannie collected the insurance money. She also, before leaving town, poisoned Arlie's mother, who had the misfortune of being bedridden and in Nannie's care. Husband number 4 was Richard Morton, also found through the Lonely Hearts columns. He was unfaithful almost immediately. Before she got around to killing him, Nannie poisoned her own mother, who had come to visit. Then she poisoned Richard. He died in May of 1953. At this point, Nannie Doss had been killing people for the better part of 3 decades. She had outlived 4 husbands, multiple children and grandchildren, her mother, a sister, and a mother-in-law. She had collected life insurance after nearly every death. She had moved from Alabama to North Carolina to Kansas to Oklahoma, leaving a trail of suspicious deaths in each state, and she had never once been questioned by the police. She was still reading her romance magazines. She was still looking for the perfect love. Part 3. The Last Husband. Samuel Doss was different from the others. He wasn't an alcoholic. He wasn't abusive. He was a devout Nazarene minister from Tulsa, Oklahoma, who had lost his family to a tornado and was, in his quiet way, also looking for companionship. Nannie and Samuel married in June of 1953. The problem with Samuel Doss was that he disapproved of Nannie's romance magazines. He also disapproved of her television programs. He was, in Nannie's telling, simply too controlling, too restrictive, too much like her father. He wouldn't let her watch her stories. He wouldn't let her read her magazines. In September of 1954, Samuel was admitted to the hospital with severe flu-like symptoms. He spent nearly a month there before being released on October 5th. He was home for 1 week. On October 12th, 1954, Samuel Doss was dead. His doctor was suspicious. Unlike every other physician who had attended to the people in Nannie's orbit over the previous 30 years, this one did not simply sign a death certificate and move on. He ordered an autopsy. What the autopsy revealed was staggering. Enough arsenic in Samuel Doss's system to kill several men. It was later determined that Nannie had poisoned him before his hospitalization in September, that the hospital had essentially saved his life by flushing his system, and that the moment he came home, she had started again, finishing the job with poisoned coffee. Nannie Doss was arrested in October of 1954. She was 50 years old. Part 4. The Giggling Granny. What happened next is what gave Nannie Doss her most enduring nickname. She giggled. During her interrogation, during her confession, during the retelling of how she had poisoned her husbands and her grandchildren and her mother, throughout all of it, Nannie Doss smiled and laughed. She made jokes. She told the detectives her recipes. When asked about the stewed prunes she had used to poison Samuel, she reportedly chuckled and offered cooking tips. She said repeatedly, "My conscience is clear." She said, "I married these men because I loved them." The press descended. Here was a small, plump, grandmotherly woman in her 50s who giggled about murder the way other women giggled about gossip. The papers couldn't get enough of her. They called her the Giggling Granny, the Giggling Grandma, Arsenic Annie, Lady Bluebeard. She seemed to enjoy the attention. She posed for photographs. She smiled for the cameras. She confessed to killing 4 of her husbands, Harrelson, Lanning, Morton, and Samuel Doss. She also eventually admitted to killing her mother, her sister, her grandson, and her mother-in-law. She stopped there. She never confessed to the deaths of her children or her daughter's babies, though the exhumation of several bodies revealed arsenic in quantities that told their own story. Authorities in Oklahoma chose to prosecute only on the murder of Samuel Doss, the case they could prove most cleanly. On May 17, 1955, Nannie Doss pleaded guilty to that single count of murder in exchange for a life sentence. Oklahoma did not execute women at the time, so the question of the death penalty never arose. She was sent to the McAllister State Penitentiary, where she spent the rest of her life. She continued to be cheerful. She continued to smile. She died of leukemia on June 2, 1965, at the age of 59. In closing, 11 confirmed victims, possibly more. Nearly 30 years, multiple states, countless opportunities for someone, a doctor, a coroner, a neighbor, a relative, to ask the obvious question about the woman at the center of so much death. And no one did. Because she was smiling, because she was grandmotherly, because she brought food to the sick and nursed the dying and wept at the funerals and then went home and planned the next one. Nannie Doss never explained herself beyond the most superficial terms. Bad husbands, the head injury, the search for a love she could never find. She never showed remorse. She never stopped smiling. And to this day, the full accounting of what she did, who she killed, when, and why, remains incomplete. The romance magazines are still out there, of course. The Lonely Hearts columns have simply moved online. That's our story for this True Crime Tuesdays. Thanks for listening to Fearsome Fiction. Stay curious, stay careful, and maybe think twice about who's doing the cooking.
You're listening to Mark McNeese's Fearsome Fiction podcast. Mysteries, thrillers, and rare finds. Fasten your headphones.